Um, I'm Wojtek, and I'm going to talk about building Livebook Desktop. So Livebook, you may have heard about it today. It's a interactive and collaborative code notebook written in Elixir for Elixir. You can write some Elixir code, execute it, see the results right away. Again, you probably heard about it already today or before. But if you haven't tried it yourself, I definitely urge you to do so. I think it is actually pretty magical to use it yourself for the first time. And that's actually one of the reasons we created Livebook Desktop, to make that super easy. So on the livebook.dev, there is the install Livebook link. And then there you can see that we have installers for Mac and Windows. And here they are in action. So on Windows, you download one file, you have the setup wizard, and on a Mac, we have something similar. And basically, after installing and running it, you would see something like this. So this is on my Mac. In the top right corner, we have the Livebook icon, indicating that the Livebook Desktop is running. And we have some options. We can open Livebook. So that's going to open Livebook in your web browser. So it's going to be pointed to localhost. And then we also associate the exported notebooks, the .livemd or live markdown files with the app. So if you double click on these files, we would open them in your browser. So there were two main reasons why we created Livebook Desktop, and this is installation and integration. So installation, if you already have Elixir installed, then it's super easy to use Livebook. You can just mix escript install Livebook from Hex and then run Livebook server, and that's it. If you don't have Elixir, but you have Docker, then it's really easy to, you can just run this command to use the Docker images that the team maintains. Going back to the first one though, so this assumes you have mixed, that you have Elixir. So kind of getting there, on a Mac, you might be using Homebrew, so brew install Elixir. Under the hood, that would install Erlang, because Elixir depends on Erlang. And then Erlang depends on OpenSSL and some other things. And then, like, first you need to install Homebrew. And actually you need Xcode or Xcode command line tools to use Homebrew. Now, all of that is pretty seamless. Like, a lot of the stuff is going to happen under the hood. But it is there, and each step is a potential for problems. Now, you would most likely never hit these problems on the first run. Again, it's pretty seamless, but what may happen is you got everything working today, but then 6 weeks or 6 months later, you update, and maybe like unintentionally, you update one of these dependencies, they are global, and that could break your app. One of the goals with Livebook is I think we can really help the getting started to Elixir experience. Again, it's a code notebook. You can write code, execute it. So I think it can really help with new people to Elixir, but then, or even new people to programming. But then if they hit any of these problems, this is really tough for them. So again, with Livebook Desktop, you just download one file and you're good to go. The other reason for Livebook Desktop is integration. I alluded into that already. So we have the association of the .livemd files. We also what we do is on the Livebook homepage, in the top right corner, we have two buttons. So the create badge button is gonna create a badge like this, run in Livebook. And that's gonna do, what that's gonna do is if you click on it, then it's gonna import a given notebook into your Livebook, but like which Livebook? So this is where the other button, the settings button, comes in. You can configure your Livebook installation, like the Livebook URL. And if you use Livebook Desktop, you can check this checkbox, and it's gonna this run in Livebook badge is gonna open notebook in your Livebook Desktop. Another example of operating system integration is this. If for any reason, which by the way never happened, if for any reason we failed to boot Livebook or Erlang, then we will show this error dialog. We have a button to view logs. So hopefully this way you would be able to find the issue, fix it yourself, or report a bug. We support all operating systems as long as they are called Mac or Windows. Notably, we don't support Linux, at least not yet. And this is where we need your help. So we are a very small team, so we have to pick our battles. And so we focus on making the macOS and Windows rock solid before we can commit to another port. But if someone, maybe someone from the audience, would like to start Livebook Desktop for Linux, like a community-led effort, we definitely endorse that, and we would happy to assist. All right, so building Livebook Desktop, we had to start somewhere, so this is where we started. I personally think it's pretty interesting. On the Macs, applications or application bundles are actually just directories with a particular structure. So the folder ends with the .app extension, and there is a particular set of subdirectories. And if you put a file into the contents macOS and then usually the name of the app, that's like the application launcher or the entry point. Usually that's going to be native code or compiled code, but it can actually be any executable. So like on a Unix system, that could be just a bash script, or in this case, an Elixir script. And here we use the WX. So that's WX Erlang or Erlang bindings to the WX widgets, cross-platform GUI toolkit. It ships as part of OTP, so it's really easy to use. It's just there. And yeah, here we just initialize it, create a frame or a window. With a title, we show the window, and then we sleep forever. And after making this file executable and opening the app, it just works. So pretty easy. Like, how hard could it be to build the whole app, right? So kind of decomposing this. So I'm gonna focus on code. There is the whole other world of packaging up the code. Like, we need to ship Elixir and Erlang and OpenSSL and all as part of the app. So I'm not gonna really focus on that here, but just on this code. So this is just a script, so not really production ready. So something more structured would be to put that into a gen server. And then what we can do is WX has this connect function which subscribes to events. So we can subscribe to the close window event of that frame of that window. And then we are gonna start getting messages. So when that event happens, we are gonna get a plain Erlang message. And because we are in a gen server, we can handle handle that. And I think this is actually pretty nice API. Like it, very much Erlang. We just send some messages, handle messages. I think it's actually pretty great. And again, if we run this, we are gonna get this window. Notice that in the top left corner, we have the menu bar. So on a Mac, there is a global menu bar. Applications takes turn in kind of taking it over. And automatically we would get this menu bar with some menu items. There is a quit Erlang item there. And if we click it, nothing happens. So I guess that makes sense, right? Like we have some event handling. So there is the command menu selected event that happens. And then we have some handle info code to do that. Okay, so we try again, and nothing happens. So on a Mac, again, we have this global menu bar that is that WX Erlang initializes for us, and like it's already there, and we cannot really handle any of these events ourselves. So what we ended up doing is this fix macOS menu bar. So just on a Mac, what we are gonna do is we are gonna kind of recreate the whole menu bar, and then it works. So okay, like that still works, but like the solution starts to show cracks just a little bit. It ended up not mattering at all because pretty early on we decided that like we actually don't want like a regular app with GUI. We want like a menu bar app, which again, as I showed before, we just have the GUI, just the menu bar icon in top right corner. We don't have a GUI window. Now people ask about this, like there is the whole Electron WebView apps. Why doesn't Livebook is like that? Two reasons. First reason, there is complexity there. We actually give it a go, and there were limitations. There is an even bigger issue though, which is that if we like embed a web browser, or even we like have some code that connects to web engine that's on operating systems, if there is a bug, if there is a security bug around web browsers, then we are on the hook for that, we need to release a new patch. So by not doing that, like it's your browser, it's your responsibility. So we kind of focus on we can focus on other stuff, and there is plenty of other stuff to focus on. So just minor note. Again, this top right corner, the menu bar icon on Macs, the convention tends to be they are monochromatic, and there is actually a platform call to make this kind of like a special monochromatic icon. They call them template icons, and it's actually kind of cool because this icon automatically is going to be dark on a light background. It's going to be light on a dark background. So I think it's kind of elegant, but in WX widgets, there is that API call is not exposed. So we cannot do that. And that's something to keep in mind. In these GUI toolkits, they tend to be like lowest common denominator. Sometimes they would expose like escape hatches, but sometimes they won't. And here they don't. So we have this GUI app, or rather this menu bar app. It doesn't really have any GUI, but then if we switch applications, it shows up in the application switcher, which doesn't really make sense because there is nothing really to switch to. So, and then it shows up in the dock, doesn't really make sense. So how to disable it? There is a configuration that's part of the application bundle, which I think is pretty elegant as well. And what we would do is set this LSUI element to true, saying that like this application is actually this menu bar thing. It shouldn't show up in the spaces. So we do that, and it doesn't work. And then I went into a rabbit hole, and I ended up, I found myself all the way back in, all the way down in Objective-C in WX widgets, and on this call, which sets activation policy to regular. And what this call does is that, like, no matter what we set in the configuration, this is going to be a regular app, like a GUI app. Fortunately, there is some commentary, and it says that we need to activate the application manually if it's not part of a bundle. Otherwise, basically, it's not going to work. But my app is part of a bundle. So like whether it or not it's a part of a bundle is like a different, different conversation, different bug. But that aside, there is more commentary, and they say, note that we have not one but two methods to opt out from this behavior. So someone obviously ran into this. And we ended up using one of these methods. So we overloaded one of the functions, and I sent a patch to OTP, and it got accepted, which was great, but then there is a problem, which is the time before this fix and the time when the fix is out in a new release. During that time, we are on the hook for maintaining OTP fork ourselves. So that complicated things just a little bit. In any case, moving on, there is a subscribe events function, which is really great. It allows us to capture events like the application was opened, the application was reopened, maybe a file associated with the application was opened. And again, I think this API is really great. Again, we're just gonna get Erlang message. We can handle info, have a handle info callback. Now, as I was testing this, I noticed that once in a while, I would like double click on a notebook file and then nothing happened. But then on the second try, it would. So kind of random, I don't know. I didn't notice that, no, it actually happens every time when the application was not running. And then I start application by double clicking on this file, then it didn't work. So that was pretty scary. And I did some searching, and luckily enough, I found a bug in WX widgets. It was actually a bug all the way back from 2014. It was still open at the time. And then I added like, I wrote some comments like, yeah, the bug still exists, like 8 years later. And here's a very simple way to reproduce the bug. And I didn't think much of it, but it was fixed either the same day or the next day, which was pretty fantastic. But there are two problems with this. So the first problem, okay, the time between the fix landing and then the time there is a new WX widgets version, we are on the hook for maintaining a fork. The other issue, a more important issue, is that the fix happens inside that if statement that we opted out from. So yeah, go back to square one. Anyway, so again, we have this fantastic, I really mean this. I think this is a really nice API. Very important question when you like work with GUI, cross-platform GUI things. Does this work on Windows or any other system? Yeah, this doesn't work on Windows. This function just doesn't exist in WX Erlang. There is no support for the stuff in WX widgets upstream. It's really just a Mac specific thing. So we ended up basically emulating like the interface ourselves. In some positive news, in March 2022, Dominik Letz announced that his application, written mostly in Elixir, got accepted into App Store and Google Play Store. And I was pretty mind blown. Like, this is really cool. There is now, Erlang, Elixir Beam running on people's devices. That was really fantastic. And actually, Dominik was, basically from day one of Livebook Desktop, like even before we were in contact with him, he was very, very helpful, give us a lot of time, answered a bunch of questions. He really made most of this possible, sending patches to OTP and other things. So a huge thank you to Dominik. And later that year, Dominik had some time between contracts. And I was reminded of this tweet that he has an app in the App Store, and how cool would it be if we had Livebook in the App Store? So we reached out, and he agreed to do a proof of concept with us. And again, either the same day or the very next day, we had Livebook running on my iPad. This is not like emulator, simulator. And it's not like Livebook is hosted somewhere else. No, everything is on the device. So that was pretty amazing. Awesome stuff. So the work to make that happen was that, so before our architecture from the operating system perspective was we had two OS processes. The Swift one is just like setting everything up, launching Beam, and then Beam was in a separate process. And that is no go for iPad. On iPad or on iOS, you can only have one operating system process. That's the limitation of the system. Technically, there is a fork function, but it breaks every time. So not super helpful. So the work was to basically make Erlang embeddable into applications, and that's exactly what Dominik did. Again, sending patches to OTP. As a matter of fact, we actually replicated this setup on Macs as well. And then if we had all of this running in the same process, actually the WX widgets problems went away. And the reason for that was we had this two separate operating system processes, and the WX widgets really expects to be in the main one, so to speak. So that actually solved these issues. Anyway, so that was a way to make it happen on iPad. Unfortunately, the architecture of Livebook is like this. We have the Livebook server kind of manages the notebooks. And then each notebook is actually a separate Erlang VM. And we do that for a very particular reason. So it's for isolation, so that no global state of the VM would ever affect any other notebooks. We need that for reproducibility and fault tolerance. But this means that we actually cannot have Livebook for iPad because we can only have one process. Now, we could have Livebook Lite. You can only have one notebook, but that feels kind of lame. So at the moment, we shelved the idea. As I mentioned, Dominik was super helpful throughout the project. He started the Elixir Desktop project. And so there is definitely overlap between what he did and what we were trying to do with Livebook. And we decided that there's going to be a extracted library out of this, some shared component that we could all use. And we decided to have this app bundler library, which is about bundling your app. So basically bundling the code, the OTP, Elixir, and all. We came up with this declarative configuration. So we hook into Elixir releases. So in the steps, after the assemble step, we basically bundle up the release. And then, this is just plain configuration in your Mix EXS. And then we had this declarative configuration for the app, saying that so the app is Livebook. These are the custom URL schemes that we support. These are the custom document types that we support. And we had these per operating system overrides that you could use. Like, okay, so use this icon for Mac, but use this other icon for Windows. And I mean, honestly, I'm pretty biased, but I thought it was kind of cool. You know, this declarative thing, but then under the hood, we like solve all of the problems. And the way it worked was we shipped with launcher templates. So launcher.swift.ex. It needs to be ex because we needed to inject some custom code. So we had a launcher for launcher Swift for Mac, and we had launcher VBS for Windows. So VBS, Visual Basic Script. We just started with that, just like the simplest way to start external process on Windows. As I was testing this, I noticed that like if I opened the URL or opened the file, Windows would give us this dialog that like application X wants to open this. The X was not Livebook. It was like Windows script host. Like what is even that? That's the program that interprets the Visual Basic Script files. So I thought that's not great. So instead of Visual Basic Script, we went with Visual Basic, so the compiled version. We just compile, and then this dialog then said, yeah, application Livebook wants to, you know, pretty sensible. Yeah, that was a bad idea, because what ended up happening is we started getting these reports like, yeah, I downloaded Livebook and it's malware. There is a backdoor. And you know, another one, and we thought we made we thought we were doing the right things. Like we used the Visual Basic compiler that comes with Windows, so you know we use the official tools, of course. But then turns out people tend to write malware in Visual Basic. That's weird. And like to be completely honest with you, that was pretty tough. Like we used the cross-platform GUI toolkits, but we found ourselves doing this per operating system workarounds, and then like you know it's fine that there are bugs, right? But like we have to go down deeper to fix these bugs, like in these different layers. So that was pretty tough. And then the app bundler idea, even though still I think the declarative UI was kind of cool, it wasn't really. It didn't turn out to be practical because like we hid all of the native code, then if you needed something special for your app, there wasn't really a good idea. So yeah, again, that was not fantastic. And we took a step back. And just to be clear, I think like these cross-platform GUI toolkits like WX Erlang and WX Widgets as well, I think these are actually really fantastic pieces of technologies. And like any communications I had with the maintainers, they were just great, like super responsive, super helpful, kind. But for our use case, that didn't work. To be fair, we have a somewhat niche use case, which is just a menu bar app, you know, kind of hidden, so not really the usual use case. So yeah, we took a step back, and instead of using these GUI, cross-platform GUI toolkits, we decided that, yeah, we are gonna use native GUIs. And instead of app bundler project, which is like hiding all of the machinery, like abstracting everything out, we decided to have a different library which bridges the native code that you write with the Elixir code on the backend that you write as well. And we call this Elixir Kit. And so for Livebook, the API is pretty much the same as we had before. We start Elixir Kit, which is just subscribing to events, and then we can publish events, and then we can handle the events that come back from the clients. And then we had clients. We actually wrote this code ourselves. So this is livebook.swift for Macs. And actually, again, like our application doesn't really have a lot of desktop footprint. So the whole file is like 150 lines of code, really manageable. And then we stuck with the platform tooling, so then we could use like Swift.build. So we used the Swift package manager structure, which really isn't made for apps. It's more for like libraries. So we kind of maybe overuse it a little bit, but yeah, we thought that was a pretty good fit. And the whole idea, though, was very different. Instead of like running away from these tools, we kind of embrace them. And I think it makes sense because if someone would be writing more complicated application, it would probably make sense to write that in Xcode or Visual for Mac or Visual Studio for Windows. So we try to embrace these tools. So we have livebook.cs or C# for Windows as well. And again, we have the .NET build. We can use the .NET build tool. In terms of the API is really straightforward. We just start ElixirKit, so subscribing to events, and you can publish events. So that's on the server side. And then on the client side, we have, again, for Swift, so starting ElixirKit. This establishes a TCP connection between the front end and the server. So they exchange messages over that connection. And yeah, we can publish events, or we can subscribe to events. And we have the same for C#. And yeah, ElixirKit lives in the Livebook project at the moment. Eventually, it's going to be extracted out, but it's just easier this way. As part of the project, so we have this OTP bootstrap directory. So this is just a bunch of scripts to bootstrap OTP for Mac. So we, from scratch, built OpenSSL. We built OTP kind of tied to that OpenSSL. And we cross-compile this to both Intel Macs and Apple Silicon Macs and kind of bring this together to the so-called universal binaries. So then we have just one installer for Livebook. And there is a whole other thing that we have, which is building the installers, like patching up the apps, building the installers. That's part of ElixirKit. We have some scripts around that, so it's all reusable. As part of ElixirKit, we also have a demo project, and the demo contains like the backend code. Again, similar stuff as before. We start ElixirKit, we publish a message, type log, and then hello from Elixir. And every 1 second, we would be like, we are going to stop in X seconds. So we publish these messages, these events, and then we would stop after 5. And then, so that's the backend code of the demo. And then the demo has 4 different front ends. So we have the demo, so we have the Swift front end. So that's like the bare bones Swift. Again, we just start ElixirKit, we publish an event, hello from Swift, and then we subscribe to events. And after we got something, we would log it. We have the same thing for .NET. So that's the demo C#. Funnily enough, maybe you have heard .NET is cross-platform-ish, so we can run this code on a Mac. I mean ish because like this code is actually going to work, but there is the Windows Forms thing that's not going to work on a Mac. It actually works on Mono, which is like this open source .NET like reimplementation, but it would, like a trivia, it would only work on macOS 10.15 because it was the last system that works with 32 bits. Yeah, so they never ported to 64. Anyway, we also have the demo for AppKit, so that's the GUI toolkit for Mac. And yeah, again, we just start ElixirKit, subscribe, publish some messages, and this is that in practice. In the log, you can see hello from AppKit, hello from Elixir. So we have the connection, we can exchange messages, stopping in 5, stopping in 4. We log a message if a button was pressed. And we have the same demo for Windows. And yeah, I think we are pretty happy with the solution. We are confident that this is the way to go for us because, you know, we can, if something, you know, we have full control basically. So if there is any like a special thing that we want to do, we can totally do that because we write the native code. There are trade-offs with that, obviously. So we have to maintain a code base per platform. Again, this trade-off totally makes sense to us. Like if you would have like a really complicated GUI, then maybe like a cross-platform GUI toolkit would make sense. But for us, we have very small footprint, so this definitely is the right trade-off for us. The other trade-off is like, great, we you know, we are gonna write all of this native code. Yeah, that's hard. So you know, network concurrent programming, like for me, without prior background in these languages, was not easy. And pretty early on, I noticed, like I learned these rules So, never block the main thread. And then GUI updates needs to happen on the main thread. So we had this bug report the other day, like a while ago, that someone installed Livebook, they started it, and nothing worked, like no error, no anything. Yeah, as I was adding a feature, I blocked the main thread. So never block the main thread. And yeah, I'm basically out of time, but so some people already ask about, like, what about LiveView native? Like, is there any overlap with what we've been doing? These projects are completely orthogonal, but I think it would be really interesting to use both of them. Because what LiveView native does is it uses Elixir on some backend, like on the internet, to like drive the UI. But then with ElixirKit, we can actually have that backend on the device as well. So I think there could be pretty interesting opportunities in there. But yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Cool, thank you. Amazing talk. We have a few minutes for questions before lunch. So one there. Sorry, Jonathan, can you please?
Hi, amazing talk. So not a question, but please do the Livebook Lite. I would love to have it on the iPad.
Yeah, I agree. It would be good. Yeah. Why don't you do it?
Hi, Wojtek. Thanks for the talk. I haven't seen the Elixir kit before, but are you still running it in the same process? And how do you do the communication? I'm curious about that.
At the moment we actually run in two different processes, so we don't use the embedded one. But yeah, we talk over TCP connection. It would be totally possible to do the embedded route, which would be kind of cool, because then we wouldn't have to necessarily talk over TCP connection, just like use the native messaging. So that would be cool. Yeah, we ended up not using this because I think this is like, if we did the iPad app, then we would definitely go that route. But without going this route, it is more portable, so to speak, because people won't need that special OTP with the patches that you created, which we are all very thankful for, Dominic. Let's give a round of applause to Dominic.